Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another video. Today we're talking stocks, we're talking Boeing. Now 2020 is looking to be a rough year for most businesses, but with negative news mounting, revenue and delivery collapse, dividend being slashed, downgrades and lowered guidance all over the place, it's looking to be maybe the toughest on Boeing right now. Now, I used to personally be a shareholder in the company, but I sold all my shares at $350 early this year, and I am no longer a shareholder of the company. Maybe I will one day in the future, who knows. At this rate, I might buy in at some point. Now, Boeing is one of the greatest all-American businesses throughout history, and over its 103 years history, it's been through ups and downs, world wars, financial crisis, but through consistency and great leadership, the company has been able to stay in business and keep us all flying safe for 103 years. That in itself is a great achievement. And it has built models such as the 787, B-29, the 747, the V-22 Osprey. So they've really contributed to the commercial and military success of the US aircraft manufacturing base. For all of those 103 years, Boeing has been able to return money to shareholders, employees, and the management. But in 2019, when the 737 MAX crisis hit, the company was facing their biggest challenge to date. Two planes crashed. It was a tragedy, and they were really struggling in the aftermath of this, both in terms of the brand and financially. Now with 2020 on top of that, the US plane maker is not just struggling but fighting for survival. So I'm going to look at some numbers and try to make up my mind whether I think Boeing can actually survive 2020 and beyond. I'm going to start off with the negative here. So big picture, Boeing is a very important business to the US. It is vital to their economy and to the US armed forces and the pentagon, putting it at the top of the list of companies that the government will try and step in to help. But even with the government at its back, simply throwing money at this company is not going to help the fact that people, no one are buying their planes and people are not flying. And this comes after the 737 MAX crisis and the ramifications of that. So I think they will face really rough waters. And even with the government's help, it's going to be challenged to stay afloat right now. Now, during and after the initial 737 MAX crisis, the company raised a lot more debt, putting its total weight at $41.1 billion US, making it the most indebted company in the world. Debt is not necessarily a bad thing, keep this in mind. And for a healthy business with a great balance sheet, cash flow, and income outlook, debt is a natural thing and can even be a good thing, especially now that we have low interest rates. But Boeing is not a great place now, and they're in the exact opposite situation of what you want when you have a lot of debt. And their debt to EBITDA, so if you take their income and they have to pay taxes and depreciation on their assets, the income that is left to pay down the debt is what debt to EBITDA means. And the ratio was 57.6, which is the highest I've ever seen, which means after taxes and depreciation, the debt is 57 times larger than the income they're left with, which is what they have to pay off the debt, which is way too much. Now, this is going to be a lot higher in 2019 and 2020 and probably for 2021, but it will stabilize very quickly once their revenue catches up, because the revenue is going to exponentially grow after this crisis, and thus the ratio will become exponentially smaller. So this is not a huge deal, but right now it's looking really, really bad. And even with a low interest rates and almost 10 billion on their balance sheet still after this crisis, the company is being downgraded both financially and the stock all over the place, which is making investors nervous and even pulling out of the stock. So even though they might be able to take this hit, the numbers just doesn't look good at all. Onto their deliveries and revenue numbers, which is the essential part here. Now in 2019, during the 737 MAX crisis, the company still managed to deliver 345 planes, down from 806 in 2018, an already massive drop of 58%. And its revenue subsequently fell, to abysmal 75.6 billion, down from 101,127 million in 2018. So that's a huge drop right there. And its stock price is in absolute free fall, falling more than 60% year to date, and it even fell below $100 per share. That's down from an all-time high of 450, I believe. And this has all happened in the span of 2 years. So a lot of money has come out of the company, and they don't really have the stock market at its back any longer. Now, the stock price fall presents its own set of issues, but the revenues is surely to drop maybe closer to 50 billion, if not even closer to 40 or 30 billion. They don't really have a big backlog, and there's no more orders coming in, thus the negative revenue outlook. For the 2 first months of 2020, Boeing delivered a harsh 30 jets, putting them on an excluded trajectory of 180 jets, which is still the worst year in decades. That's not going to happen because of the current situation, so I think we're looking at 60-70 commercial jets delivered. Maybe they have a backlog I don't know about. Maybe the situation will be cleared up faster than we think. But for now, I don't think they're even going to hit 80 or 90 jets. So they're going to have to reduce capacity and cut off workers to be able to, for the massive cost of operations, not to drown out the small revenue they're going to get from these 30, 40, 60, 70 jets. Military orders might be a bright spot, but I seriously doubt it. The Pentagon has been buying some upgraded F-15X as of late, and I think their plan is to add more F-15s to their fleets. But military spending is not the priority now. Not for the US, not for the rest of the world. And defense spending is going to take a massive hit because no amount of F-35s, F-22s or F-15s can shoot down this virus, which is all we're trying to do right now. So military spending, probably not even a bright spot. Assuming the worst case scenario, which is the only scenario right now for Boeing, their revenues are going to fall off a cliff. So will the stock price and deliveries, although they already have. The dividend is going to be slashed, workers are going to be laid off, and their debt to EBITDA is going to be the worst the market has ever seen from a Dow Jones component. Factories will be closed, and all Boeing can do is really brace for impact and hope they come out alive. Now, although the situation might seem hopeless, Boeing is a company with 103 years of experience, and they have a great new CEO, and they have the government at their back. So there are a couple of bright spots, and I don't think you should panic just yet. Whether you're a current shareholder or looking to buy shares. Now, first of all, military deliveries and orders are pretty much set in stone. The 2020 budget has been through Congress, and I think it's been approved. So the spending for 2020 from the US military is going to stay more or less unchanged by this. So they're going to be able to deliver a lot of fighter planes or helicopters, tanker planes, fueling planes, and maybe even some space parts for the new Space Force from the US. So military might be, if not a bright spot, at least a constant factor in all of this mess. And the company also have a lot of cash, more than most industrial companies. They have about $10.1 billion in cash on their balance sheet going into 2020. And they don't have to pay off all their debts or all their customers at once. So this 10 billion might be able to stretch out for the whole year, maybe even into 2021. So they have a bit of a financial cushion right there. And since it's such an integral part of the US economy, they have really strong lobbying efforts, and they've been able to lobby for tens of billions of dollars of the $2 trillion emergency package that the US government will deliver to its companies and other vital parts. So they're going to get a huge part of that cake. And as for most companies right now, Boeing might see a resurgence, so a big catch-up effect, once air traffic resumes. And of course, people are not going to fly less after the crisis, well, maybe for a year or two because the economy is taking a hit, but people will still be flying. And it's in fact one of the first things people will do once they're allowed back on a plane, especially people that haven't lost their job or have a stable income. You know, they're not going to be able to travel for 5 or 6, 7, maybe even 12 months. That's one of the first things they will do. Travel on vacation, travel to see their loved ones. So the demand for planes is going to pick back up at some point. And Boeing, of course, still has a duopoly with Airbus, which means a lot of orders are going to come their way. They also have a brand new motivated CEO who is brand new, so he's probably not going to be switched out in the first place. And he got handed the 737 MAX crisis, and I feel like at this point it's so bad. He's probably saying, you know what, whatever. We've taken the biggest hit we can take. This can't get any worse. And I think he's looking at the glass half full. He's new, he's been at the company for a long time, but I think he's really motivated to get through this, and that's going to really put some medals on his shirt if he can get the company through this. In closing, I know this has been a long video and there's still a little bit to go. Boeing is a vital part of the US economy and the industrial military complex, which again puts it at maybe number one of companies that the US government will help. They managed to help the banks back in the financial crisis, but right now, this crisis is general, but the worst case scenario is specifically for one industry. That's aviation, where Boeing is the biggest player, and they were struggling already before this. So this is going to be a mammoth task for Boeing and the government, because I don't think Boeing can survive without the government, to get this company through this crisis. So this begs the question, do I think Boeing will survive 2020? Yes. There are very few companies on planet Earth that has been around for 103 years. Some might say it's because of the US military, propping up Boeing. Some might say it's because there's only 2 companies making planes, and so they both stay in business no matter what. But aviation is not a simple task. Making planes and fighter jets and space stations, not the first thing a company tries to do. And they've been doing it for 103 years quite successfully until recently. So if the history of Boeing shows anything, it's that they have the fortitude to come through this. And Boeing is much more than a plane maker. It's a part of the foundation of the United States of America. And I don't think the government will let anything happen. And domestic players, so airliners and the Pentagon, will order as much stuff from Boeing as they can, and they will try help their workers, because if the factories from Boeing shut down, there goes a huge part of the economy. And once people can fly again, they're gonna fly, and airlines will see a surge in demand, and they will not have the planes to cover it, because there's basically been a blind spot of 6 or 7 months, and the demand for flying naturally grows over time. And although the economy will be hit, the growth will keep up, even though it skipped a couple of beats. And Boeing and Airbus will be right there to fill those orders. So I don't think you should panic. I think you should worry, and I think you should be wary of holding your shares or buying shares. So this might be a great opportunity to buy one of the greatest companies of all time. Stock is usually a very safe play, great dividend. You used to have a great balance sheet, and I think they will be, back on track in 3 to 5 years. And I don't think the company will go bankrupt or anything. So it's looking really bad, but don't you worry, Boeing will make it. Yep, that's about it for my video. I'll see you in the next one.